Hi, in this video we'll learn about imaginary numbers. Now let's say if I have to find the square root of -1. So if someone asks me to find the square root of 25, what do I do? Well, all I need to think is what number multiplied by itself gives me 25. Well, I know that 5 times 5 gives me 25, so I can say that the square root of 25 is going to be 5. Let's say if I have square root of 36. How do I find the value of square root of 36? Well, all I need to think is what number multiplied by itself gives me 36. I know that 6 times 6 is equal to 36, so I can say that the square root of 36 is going to be 6. How about square root of -1? Now here I need to think that what number multiplied by itself gives me -1. Let's try this. So what if I multiply -1 times -1? Well, -1 times -1 is equal to positive square root of 1. So this is not going to work, right? If I do square root of 1 times 1, that's giving me square root of positive 1 again. I'm not getting square root of -1, right? So now we know that there's no such number which when multiplied by itself gives us -1. So now we know that square root of -1 does not exist. That's why we came up with the concept of imaginary numbers. So I can say that square root of -1 is equal to I, where I stands for the imaginary number. Now, what if I need to find the value of I square? Well, if I need to find the value of I square, I can just square both sides of my equation. So if I square both sides of my equation, I'll get I square is equal to square root of -1 whole square. Well, I square will be equal to this square, and this square root is going to cancel out each other, and we'll get -1. So I square is equal to -1. So we know that I square is equal to -1. I is equal to square root of -1. Now let's find the value of I cubed. So if I have to find the value of I to the third, I can write I to the third as I squared times I. And we already know the value of I squared. I squared is -1, so I can substitute -1 for I squared, and we have I along with it, and -1 times I is going to be -I. So now I know that I to the third is equal to -I. Let's find the value of I to the fourth. So if I have to find the value of I to the fourth, I can write this as I squared times I squared. And we know that the value of I squared is -1. So we can substitute -1 for I squared. So this is going to be -1 times -1, which is equal to +1. So I know that I to the fourth is equal to +1. Now I got all these values. I got I is equal to square root of -1. I squared is -1, I to the third is -I, and I to the fourth is equal to +1. Now I'm going to use these values to find I to a higher degree. We got I is equal to square root of -1, I squared is equal to -1, I cubed is equal to -I, and I to the fourth is equal to +1. Now let's say if I have to find I to the power 22. Well, I can do some math and find the value of I to the power 22. So I can write I to the power 22 as I to the fourth times I to the fourth times I to the fourth times I to the fourth, and I keep on doing unless the powers add up to 22, because when you multiply the same basis, you can add the exponents, right? So 4 plus 4 is 8, 8 plus 4 is 12, 12 plus 4 is 16, 16 plus 4 is going to be 20, and then at the end I'll write I squared, because 20 plus 2 is going to be 22, and I'll get I to the power 22. So I can rewrite I to the power 22 as this. And now we know the value of I to the fourth is equal to 1. So all these values, well, these are going to be 1. So I'm only left with I squared, and the value of I squared is equal to -1. So now I know that I to the power 22 is equal to -1. Now this method is tedious. What if I ask you I to the power 71? Now you can do all these math to solve I to the power 71, but I'll tell you a simplest way to find I to a higher degree. All we need to do is we need to look at the exponent. My exponent is 71, you're going to divide that exponent by 4. So let's go ahead and divide 71 by 4. If I divide 71 by 4, I'll get 17 with a remainder of 3. Now, I'm not interested in this quotient at all. I don't need this. I only need to focus on the remainder. I'm only interested in the remainder. And this remainder is going to be your exponent of I. So here, I to the power 71 is equal to I to the third. And we know the value of I to the third from this chart. We know that I to the third is equal to negative I. So I can say that I to the third is equal to negative I. That means I to the power 71 is equal to negative I. So all you need to do is, you look at your exponent, whatever your exponent is, you divide that by 4. Once you divide that by 4, you only use your remainder, and that remainder is going to be your exponent of I. Now let's take a look at another example here. Let's say if I have I to the power 38. All I need to do is to divide this exponent by 4. 38 divided by 4 will be equal to 9 with a remainder of 2. I don't need to do anything with this quotient. I only need the remainder. And this remainder is going to be my exponent of I. So I can write this as I square. I can rewrite I to the power 38 as I square. And I know the value of I square is equal to negative 1. So I'll substitute this for I square. So I know that I to the power 38 is equal to negative 1. Now let's try another example. Let's say if I have I to the power 57. So we're going to divide our exponent 57 by 4. 57 divided by 4 is equal to 14 with a remainder of 1. I only need to focus on the remainder. This remainder is going to be my exponent of I. So I can rewrite I to the power 57 as I to the power 1 because my remainder is 1. So I got I to the power 1 and I to the power 1 is equal to I. Now let's try another example. Let's say if I have I to the power 204. Okay, all I need to do is to divide this exponent by 4. So if I divide 204 by 4, I will get 51 with a remainder of 0. Well, this time I didn't get any remainder. My remainder is 0. But still, this remainder 0 is going to be my exponent of I. So I can write this as I to the power 0. Well, we don't have I to the power 0 in our chart, but we know that anything raised to the power 0 other than 0 is always equal to 1. So I can say that I to the power 0 is equal to 1. So this is the simplest way to find I to a higher degree. So I hope you find this video helpful. That's all in this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you are new to this channel and want to see more videos on other math topics, be sure to subscribe down below and share it with your friends. See you in next video.